Little girl was rejected by her family. Hell's Angels biker took her in and changed her life forever. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. It was a bitterly cold evening when Emily Foster found herself on the edge of the street, lost and alone. At just 8 years old, she couldn't quite understand why her family had suddenly turned their backs on her. The warm embrace of a mother's arms was a distant memory, and her father's voice, once full of love, had become nothing but a harsh echo in her mind. They told her she wasn't wanted anymore. Her heart, fragile as it was, couldn't grasp the weight of rejection, and she wandered the streets, tears freezing on her cheeks. The wind howled through the empty city, a perfect reflection of the emptiness she felt inside. She had no idea where to go, no safe place to run to. She was just a little girl, abandoned by the very people who should have protected her. As she walked aimlessly, her feet dragging through the snow, Emily's eyes caught sight of a figure up ahead. At first, she thought it was a mirage, a dream she wished could come true. But as the figure got closer, her heart skipped a beat. It was a man on a motorcycle, his black leather jacket adorned with the unmistakable Hell's Angels patch. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The story she had heard about bikers, their rough exteriors and terrifying reputations, made her stop in her tracks. Fear gripped her, and for a moment, she considered turning around and running away. But something in the man's eyes told her to stay. His eyes, though cold and distant at first glance, held a hint of something she couldn't quite place. Something soft, something human. The roar of his Harley-Davidson engine faded as he slowed down and stopped right in front of her. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he looked down at the little girl standing alone in the snow, shivering and scared. His name was Jack Razor Morrison, a man hardened by years of riding with the Hell's Angels, someone who had seen more pain and darkness than most people could ever imagine. But in that moment, as he gazed at Emily, something stirred inside him. He had always kept his distance from the world, never getting involved with anyone. It was too dangerous, too risky. But Emily's vulnerability, her silent plea for help, was enough to break through his tough exterior. "Hey there," Jack said gruffly, his voice rough from years of shouting over the noise of his bike. "Are you okay?" Emily didn't respond at first, her small body trembling with fear and cold. She looked up at him with wide eyes, unsure of whether she could trust him. She had been betrayed before, and now, standing before this stranger, she didn't know what to think. "You're safe now," Jack continued, his voice softer this time. He could see the fear in her eyes, but there was something else too. A kind of strength, a spark of hope. Something he hadn't seen in a long time. Slowly, Jack dismounted his bike and knelt down to Emily's level. His huge frame seemed intimidating, but his actions were gentle. He reached out a hand, offering her help, not as a biker, but as a human being who could see the suffering in her eyes. "What's your name, kid?" he asked. Emily hesitated, but then whispered, "Emily." Jack nodded. "Well, Emily, you're not alone anymore." He stood up and glanced around. The street was empty, the cold wind still biting at them. "Let's get you out of this storm. You're coming with me." Emily stared at him, confused and uncertain. She had never been in a stranger's care before. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw something that made her heart soften. This wasn't just another man who had hurt her. This was someone who might actually help. With Jack's support, Emily climbed onto the back of his bike, and they sped off into the night, the sound of the engine echoing in the quiet streets. As the wind whipped past her, Emily clung to Jack, the warmth of his body offering her a sense of safety she hadn't felt in days. This was the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one that she never could have imagined, but one that would change her forever. Jack carefully rode through the snowy streets of the small town, Emily clinging to him tightly, her small arms wrapped around his waist. The wind had picked up, but the warmth from his leather jacket kept her safe from the cold. The engine of his Harley growled steadily beneath them, cutting through the night, but in the midst of the harsh weather, everything felt oddly peaceful. As they approached Jack's home, a small, weathered cabin on the outskirts of town, Emily couldn't help but look around. The snowstorm had transformed the world into a winter wonderland, the trees covered in layers of white, the ground slick with ice. She had never seen anything like it. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. As Jack pulled into the driveway and parked the bike, he helped her off carefully, making sure she wasn't too shaken by the cold or the ride. "You're safe now," Jack reassured her, his deep voice warm despite the rough edges. Emily looked up at the small cabin with curiosity. It was humble, but there was something comforting about it. Jack's home was far from luxurious, but it had an undeniable charm. The cabin had been his sanctuary for the past few years, a place where he could escape from the past, a place where no one judged him for his history. The storm raged outside as they stepped into the warmth of the cabin. The fire crackled in the hearth, its light dancing across the room, casting soft shadows on the wooden walls. Emily hesitated at the threshold, unsure of what to do next. "Come on in," Jack said, his voice gentle as he gestured toward the worn couch near the fireplace. Emily took a tentative step inside, feeling the warmth of the fire embrace her like a long-lost friend. Jack motioned for her to sit down. "You must be freezing. Let me get you something hot to drink." As Jack went into the small kitchen, Emily looked around, her eyes taking in the simplicity of the space. The walls were lined with shelves filled with tools, motorcycle parts, and old photographs, most of which had faded over time. There was a workbench cluttered with half-finished projects, a testament to Jack's love for motorcycles. Despite the modesty of the cabin, there was a sense of order, a quiet pride in the way things were kept. It wasn't much, but it was Jack's. And for Emily, it felt like a safe haven. Jack returned with a steaming mug of hot cocoa and handed it to Emily with a smile. "Drink this. You'll feel better." Emily took the mug gratefully, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers as she sipped the drink. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just stared into the fire, lost in her thoughts. Jack sat down across from her, his eyes softening as he watched her. He knew she was frightened, uncertain about the strange turn her life had taken. But he could also see the resilience in her, the strength that had been buried deep inside her, waiting for someone to see it. Jack had seen that kind of strength before, in himself. He had once been a broken man, haunted by the things he had done and the people he had lost. But in that moment, as he looked at Emily, he realized he wasn't so different from her. They had both been abandoned, both hurt by those they trusted. But they had also both survived. Emily finally spoke, her voice small but steady. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her eyes meeting his. Jack leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees as he looked at her. "Because I know what it's like to feel lost," he said quietly. "I know what it's like to feel like there's no one left to turn to. But you don't have to be alone anymore. I'm not going anywhere." Emily nodded slowly, a small sense of comfort settling in her chest. For the first time in days, she felt like she was finally in a place where she could breathe, where she wasn't running from the world. She looked at Jack, really looked at him, and saw something more than the rough biker with the Hells Angels patch. She saw a man who had his own scars, his own battles. And in that moment, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one who needed saving. Jack stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the storm as it continued to rage outside. "The storm's not letting up," he said, his voice low. "But we'll figure things out. One step at a time." Emily watched him for a moment before she spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "What now?" Jack turned back to her, offering a faint smile. "Now, we take things one day at a time. You don't have to worry about anything for now. You're safe here." As the night wore on, Emily sat by the fire, her mind racing with thoughts of her family, her past, and the strange turn her life had taken. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. Jack was right. She was safe here. And maybe, just maybe, she could start over. It wasn't much, but it was enough. And in that moment, that was all she needed. Days passed, and the storm outside showed no signs of slowing down. Inside the small cabin, Emily began to settle into her new reality, but every day was still filled with uncertainty. Jack had kept his word. He had given her a bed by the fire, warmth, and safety, things she had once thought lost forever. Each morning, she would wake up to the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen, the soft hum of Jack working on his motorcycle in the garage. He had given her space to think and heal, but there were moments when the weight of her past still felt overwhelming. One afternoon, as the winter sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cabin, Emily was sitting by the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. Her mind drifted to memories of her family. The coldness of their rejection still lingered, even though she was no longer there. She wondered what they were doing, if they even noticed she was gone. She didn't know where to go from here, but Jack had promised that she didn't have to be alone anymore, and she was starting to believe him. Jack had noticed Emily's quiet moments, the way she would stare out the window, lost in thought. He knew that the pain she carried with her wouldn't disappear overnight, but he also knew that he could help her find a way forward. He wasn't the kind of man who was good with words, but he had learned the importance of patience. He decided it was time to talk to her. "Emily," Jack said one evening as they sat by the fire. "I know you're still processing everything, and I get that. But I want you to know something. You're not a burden to me." Emily looked at him, her eyes wide with curiosity. "I know you've been through a lot, but you're not alone anymore. You're safe here, and I'm not going anywhere." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that Emily had never felt before. She had been told she was unwanted, a burden. But here was Jack, a man with his own scars, telling her that she mattered. For the first time in a long while, she felt something stir inside her, a sense of hope. Jack leaned back in his chair, his eyes focused on the fire. "I know what it's like to be lost," he said quietly, his voice softer than usual. "I spent a long time running from my past, from who I was. But it doesn't have to be that way for you. You've got a chance to start fresh, Emily. Don't let the past define you." Emily sat silently for a moment, taking in his words. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that Jack was right. She couldn't keep running from her past forever. "I don't know what to do," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel so lost. I don't even know who I am anymore." Jack looked at her, his eyes full of understanding. "You're still you, Emily. You're just figuring out who that is now. And that's okay. Take your time. We all do." Emily nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words sink in. She had spent so much time focused on the pain, on what she had lost, that she hadn't given herself the chance to heal. Maybe it was time to start. "Thanks, Jack," she said quietly, her voice soft but steady. Jack gave her a small smile, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Anytime, kid. Anytime." In the days that followed, Emily began to open up more. She helped Jack in the garage, cleaning tools, sorting through parts, and learning about the motorcycles Jack had built over the years. She found herself enjoying the work, the feeling of creating something from nothing. It gave her a sense of purpose, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She also began to venture out into the town, getting to know the locals, who had been curious about the newcomer staying with the infamous Hell's Angel. At first, people kept their distance, but as they saw her with Jack, they began to warm up. Emily had never realized how much kindness could be found in small, everyday moments. She had spent so much of her life hiding from the world, but now she was starting to see it differently. One afternoon, as Emily was walking back from the store, she found Jack waiting for her at the end of the driveway. "Hey, kid," he called out, waving. "Got a surprise for you." Emily's curiosity piqued, and she jogged up to him. "What's the surprise?" Jack's grin was wide as he gestured to a small pile of wood and tools by the garage. "We're building something together. You and me." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "What are we building?" Jack winked at her. "A bike. A new one. You've been helping me with the old ones, but now it's your turn. You get to design it, pick out the parts. It's all yours." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined she would be building something so personal. She had always loved motorcycles, but now she was going to create one. With Jack's help, of course. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a surge of excitement, a sense of purpose. She wasn't just a lost girl anymore. She was someone with a future, someone who could create something amazing. She looked up at Jack, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. Jack smiled back at her. "You don't have to thank me, Emily. This is just the beginning." And with that, they began working together on the bike, each step bringing them closer, not just as a mentor and student, but as something more. In that moment, Emily realized that Jack wasn't just helping her build a motorcycle. He was helping her rebuild her life, one piece at a time. As the days turned into weeks, Emily began to feel more and more at home. Jack had kept his word. He was there for her, not just as a protector, but as someone who understood the pain of feeling abandoned. The bike project had become more than just a way to pass the time. It was a symbol of hope, a way for Emily to reclaim some control over her life. With Jack's steady guidance, she learned not just about motorcycles, but about herself. Each piece of the bike they worked on together was a step forward in her healing process. Jack had been patient with her, explaining every part of the bike, every tool, every movement. He showed her how to weld, how to fine-tune the engine, how to make something beautiful from nothing. She was surprised by how much she enjoyed it, how each task felt like a puzzle she was meant to solve. One afternoon, as they were working in the garage, Jack stopped and wiped his hands on a rag, looking over at Emily. "You're doing great, kid," he said with a smile. "I'm proud of you." Emily looked up from the engine she was working on, her face lighting up with a shy smile. "Thanks, Jack. I never thought I could do something like this." Jack chuckled. "I told you you've got it in you. You're stronger than you think." As the bike slowly came together, Emily felt a sense of accomplishment she had never experienced before. The parts were starting to take shape, the bike looking more and more like something she could ride herself. She could see herself riding it through the open road, the wind in her hair, the freedom she had always dreamed of, the freedom she thought was lost forever. One evening, as they worked late into the night, Emily looked up at Jack, her expression serious. "Jack, do you think I'll ever be able to go back to my family?" she asked softly. Jack paused, his eyes meeting hers. "I don't know, kid. But what I do know is that you've got a chance to build your life on your own terms now. You don't need to go back to people who didn't want you. You've got a family here. You've got me." Emily's throat tightened at his words. She hadn't realized until that moment how much she had needed to hear that. For so long, she had felt like an outsider, like she didn't belong anywhere. But Jack's words made her feel like she had a place, a purpose. "You're right," she said quietly. "I've been so focused on the past that I forgot about the future. But now I see that I can make something of it." Jack smiled, a rare, warm smile that softened his usually tough demeanor. "That's the spirit." Over the next few weeks, Emily continued to grow, not just in her skills with the bike, but in her confidence. She began to believe in herself again, in a way she hadn't in years. The bike became a reflection of that change. Each turn of the wrench, each adjustment to the engine, was a step forward in her own journey. As Emily worked on the bike one afternoon, she heard a knock on the door. She looked up, wiping the grease from her hands. Jack was in the garage with her, and he stood up, walking toward the door. He opened it to reveal a man standing on the porch, holding a large bouquet of flowers. Emily felt a flutter of nervousness in her chest as she recognized the man. It was one of the neighbors from the town, a man named Bill who had seen her around. "Hey there," Bill said with a friendly smile. "I brought these for you, Emily. I thought you might like them." Emily blinked in surprise. "For me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Bill nodded, holding out the flowers. "Yeah, you've been through a lot. I just wanted to do something nice for you." Emily hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't expected kindness from anyone in the town, let alone a complete stranger. But as she looked at the flowers in Bill's hands, something inside her softened. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, accepting the bouquet. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Bill smiled warmly. "You're welcome, Emily. You're stronger than you think. I can see that now." As Bill left, Emily stood there for a moment, the flowers in her hands, a symbol of the kindness she had never known. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of acceptance she had been craving. The past wasn't gone, and it never would be. But Emily knew now that she didn't have to carry it alone. She had Jack, she had the people around her, and she had herself. And that was enough. That evening, as Jack and Emily sat together by the fire, the soft glow of the flames dancing across the room, Emily looked at the bike they had built. It wasn't finished yet, but it was close. And in that moment, Emily realized that she wasn't just building a bike. She was building her future. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face them. The days turned into weeks, and Emily's life began to shift in ways she never thought possible. The bike that she and Jack had worked on together was almost finished, and every part of it felt like a piece of her past being left behind. She had gone from a frightened little girl lost in the world to someone who was beginning to take control of her future. Every morning, Jack would be in the garage, working on something, fixing the bike, or tinkering with his own projects. Emily would join him, sometimes quietly watching him work, other times helping him, learning the ins and outs of motorcycle mechanics. It was something she never thought she'd be good at, but with Jack's patient guidance, she found herself improving every day. She began to notice small changes within herself. The fears that once gripped her every waking moment started to fade, replaced by something new: confidence. It wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of her past would crash down on her, days when the memories of her family would rise up to haunt her. But Jack was always there, steady and calm, reminding her that she wasn't alone. One evening, after a long day of working on the bike, Jack stood up and wiped his hands on a rag. He looked at Emily, who was busy tightening a bolt on the engine. She had been focused all day, but now she looked up, meeting his gaze. "You've come a long way, kid," Jack said, his voice filled with quiet pride. Emily smiled, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. "I couldn't have done it without you." Jack gave a small nod, but he didn't say anything for a moment. Then, he sighed, as if deciding something. "You know, Emily, I've been thinking. You've got a gift for this. The way you work with your hands, how you see the details. You've got a future in this. I've seen it." Emily blinked, surprised. "You really think so?" she asked, her voice unsure. Jack crossed the room, stepping closer. "I don't just think so. I know so. I've been doing this for years, and I've never met someone who took to it like you have." His words warmed her in a way that made her heart swell. For the first time in her life, someone saw something in her. She had always been told she was weak, unwanted, but here was Jack, a man who had every reason to look at her as a burden, telling her that she was capable. "Maybe," she said slowly, "maybe I could make a life out of this. I mean, I never thought I could before." Jack smiled, a genuine, warm smile that made him look less like the hardened biker he was and more like a father figure. "You can. You just have to believe it, Emily." The words hit her harder than she expected. Believe it. It was the one thing she had struggled with her entire life, believing in herself. But with Jack's words echoing in her mind, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could. The next few weeks were filled with even more work on the bike. Every time Emily added a new part, tightened a screw, or adjusted the handlebars, she felt a little more in control, a little more at peace with who she was becoming. She started to think about the future in a new way. For the first time in her life, she was looking forward to something. It wasn't just about the bike anymore. It was about her. It was about building something for herself. One evening, Jack came into the garage while Emily was cleaning up. "You know, I've got a friend who owns a bike shop in town," he said casually. Emily raised an eyebrow, unsure of where he was going with this. "Really? What's that got to do with me?" Jack leaned against the doorframe, folding his arms. "Well, I was thinking, you're good enough to start working at a shop. You've learned everything you need to know right here." Emily's eyes widened. "Wait, you think I could actually work in a bike shop?" she asked, her voice a little shaky. Jack nodded. "Why not? You've got the skills. And I know the guy who runs the place. He's a straight shooter. I can put in a good word for you." The thought of actually working in a shop, surrounded by people who shared her passion, was overwhelming, but it was also exciting. Emily had never considered such a possibility before. She had spent her whole life thinking she wasn't good enough for anything, let alone something like that. "But what about here?" she asked hesitantly. "What about the bike?" Jack smiled softly. "The bike's almost done, kid. It's a symbol of where you've been and where you're going. But you don't need to stay here forever. I'm not going anywhere, and you don't have to either. But I think you should go for it." Emily felt a surge of emotions rise up in her chest. She had spent so much time running, trying to avoid the pain of her past, but now she was faced with a choice: to step forward into something new, something that was all hers, or to stay stuck in the past. She didn't have to decide right away, but Jack's words had planted a seed in her mind. For the first time, she felt like she had a real chance at something more. The next day, Emily found herself walking into the bike shop Jack had mentioned. It was small but had a cozy charm to it. There were bikes lined up along the walls, tools hanging neatly in rows, and the smell of motor oil and leather filled the air. As she walked in, the bell above the door jingled, and a man behind the counter looked up. "You must be Emily," he said with a welcoming smile. "Jack told me you'd be stopping by." Emily smiled back, feeling a nervous excitement rise in her chest. "Yeah, I'm Emily," she said, shaking his hand. I've been working on bikes for a while now, and Jack said you might have a spot for me here. The man nodded thoughtfully. We're always looking for someone who knows their stuff. If you're up for it, I'd like to see what you can do. Emily's heart raced as she realized that this was the moment. This was the chance she had been waiting for. She wasn't just Emily Foster, the abandoned girl anymore. She was Emily, the mechanic. And for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The days in the bike shop were long, but they felt right. Emily found herself waking up early, eager to get to work, eager to learn more, and eager to feel the weight of the tools in her hands again. The shop had a steady rhythm. Customers coming and going, bikes being repaired, and parts being polished to perfection. Every day, Emily worked side by side with the team, fixing engines, tuning bikes, and learning from the older mechanics who had been doing it for years. The work was tough, but it felt like a puzzle she was meant to solve. And with every solved problem, her confidence grew. One afternoon, the shop's owner, Vince, pulled Emily aside while she was finishing a repair on a vintage Harley-Davidson. "You've been doing great, Emily," Vince said, his gruff voice warm with approval. "I've been keeping an eye on you, and I think you're ready for more responsibility." Emily looked up at him, surprised. "More responsibility? What do you mean?" Vince gave her a sideways smile. "I've got a big project coming in. It's a custom build, and it's going to need someone who knows what they're doing. I think you're the one for the job." Emily's heart skipped a beat. A custom build. That was the kind of project she had always dreamed of working on. The thought of creating something from scratch, putting her own touch on it, filled her with excitement. "You really think I can handle it?" she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Vince nodded. "I know you can. You've got the skills, and you've got the heart. I wouldn't offer it to you if I didn't believe in you." Emily felt a swell of pride. "I'll do my best," she said, her voice steady. "I won't let you down." For the next few weeks, Emily threw herself into the custom build. She researched parts, studied blueprints, and worked late into the evenings, making sure every detail was perfect. Jack stopped by the shop to check on her progress, his usual calm demeanor hiding his own pride. "You've really got the hang of this," Jack said one evening, as he watched her carefully measure the frame of the motorcycle. "This is your thing, Emily. You're building something bigger than just a bike. You're building a future." His words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so much time thinking about her past, about the things she had lost, but now, in that shop, working on that bike, she realized she wasn't just building something for herself. She was building her future. The custom build was completed a few weeks later, and it was a masterpiece. The sleek design, the polished chrome, the deep black paint, it was everything Emily had hoped it would be. When Vince saw it for the first time, his eyes widened with approval. "This is amazing, Emily," he said, his voice full of admiration. "You've got talent, and you've got a future here. I'm proud of you." Those words, "I'm proud of you," hit Emily in a way she hadn't expected. She had been waiting for validation her entire life, and here, in this shop, she had finally earned it. The next day, the custom bike was ready to be delivered to its owner, a well-known biker who had been eagerly awaiting the finished product. When Emily handed over the keys, the man smiled, nodding in approval. "You did good work, kid," he said. "I'll be back for sure." As Emily walked back into the shop, her heart swelled with pride. This was it. This was her moment. She wasn't just a lost girl anymore. She was someone who could create something, someone who had something to offer. That evening, after the shop closed, Jack stopped by to check on her. Emily was sitting on a stool, cleaning up her work area, a satisfied smile on her face. "How does it feel?" Jack asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Feels amazing," Emily replied, looking up at him. "Like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be." Jack smiled, his eyes softening. "I knew you'd get here," he said quietly. "You just had to believe in yourself." Emily nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know exactly where her future would take her. But for the first time, she felt like she was on the right path. The next day, as she stood in the shop, looking over the bikes, she realized something. She had spent so much of her life feeling like she wasn't enough. But now, with each bike she repaired, each new skill she learned, and each day that passed, she was building her life. She was stronger than she had ever given herself credit for. And with Jack by her side, supporting her every step of the way, Emily knew she was ready for whatever came next. The future was hers to create. The weeks passed, and Emily's life seemed to be falling into place in a way she had never imagined. The bike shop had become more than just a job. It had become her sanctuary, a place where she could be herself, where she could create, build, and learn. Every day she woke up with a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging that she hadn't had in years. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She had found a rhythm in the work she did at the shop. She learned how to customize bikes, how to handle the toughest repairs, and how to make every bike feel like it was a part of her. Vince, the shop owner, continued to trust her with more complex projects, and every time she completed one, the feeling of accomplishment grew stronger. It wasn't just about fixing bikes anymore. It was about proving to herself that she could do something, that she could build a life from the ground up. One afternoon, while Emily was working on a particularly challenging repair, Jack stopped by the shop, as he often did. He watched her for a moment, his arms crossed over his chest, a faint smile on his face. "You're looking more and more like a pro every day," he said, his voice carrying a quiet pride. Emily glanced up at him, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "I'm just doing my best," she said, a modest smile on her face. "You've got more than that in you," Jack replied. "You've got the heart of a true mechanic." His words made her pause for a moment. She had been so focused on proving herself to others, but Jack was the one who had always believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. And now, hearing his praise, it made her realize just how far she had come. Jack's approval meant more to her than she had ever expected. He had been the one constant in her life since she had arrived in town. He had given her a place to stay, a job to do, and most importantly, he had given her the confidence to believe in herself. Over the next few weeks, Emily started to feel like a part of the town. She was no longer the lost, abandoned girl who had wandered into the shop looking for a way out. She was Emily, the mechanic, someone who had earned her place. People in the town started to recognize her, to appreciate the work she did. They would stop by the shop to ask for her help, to chat with her about the bikes she worked on. It was a new feeling, a feeling of being seen and valued. One afternoon, as Emily was walking back to the shop from the nearby cafe, she noticed a familiar face. It was Bill, the man who had given her the flowers when she first arrived. He smiled when he saw her, his warm, friendly smile making her feel at ease. "Hey, Emily," he called out. "How's the bike business treating you?" Emily smiled back, a little surprised by the question. "It's going great, actually," she said, her voice full of pride. "I'm working on some pretty cool stuff." Bill nodded, looking impressed. "I heard you're the one to talk to around here when it comes to bikes. I've got an old one that needs some work, and I was wondering if you could take a look at it." Emily's heart swelled at the compliment. She had never imagined that people would come to her for help, and now here was someone asking for her expertise. "Sure, bring it by any time," she said with a smile. "I'd be happy to take a look." As Bill walked off, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. It was moments like this, moments when people recognized her skills and trusted her, that made everything worth it. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. Later that week, after a long day of working on bikes, Emily sat down in the back of the shop, the quiet hum of the place settling around her. She had become so immersed in her work that she hadn't even realized how much time had passed. The door to the shop opened, and Jack walked in, his boots clicking on the floor as he approached. "What's up, kid?" he asked, looking over at her. Emily looked up at him, a contented smile on her face. "Just thinking," she said softly, "about how far I've come." Jack nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You've come a long way," he said quietly. "I'm proud of you." Those words, coming from Jack, meant more to Emily than she could express. She had spent so many years feeling like she wasn't enough, feeling like she didn't belong anywhere. But now, here she was, standing in a shop she had helped build, surrounded by people who respected her, who believed in her. She wasn't just someone who had been abandoned. She was someone who had found her place. "Thank you," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you." Jack smiled softly. "You would have figured it out, Emily. You've always had it in you." Emily looked around the shop, the space that had become her second home. It wasn't just the bikes that had been rebuilt here, it was her. She had rebuilt herself, piece by piece, and every day, she was becoming stronger. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, Emily felt ready to face it. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready to take on whatever came next, with Jack by her side and the skills she had worked so hard to develop. And as she stood there, looking at the bike she had worked on, she realized that this was just the beginning. Her journey was far from over, but now, she had the strength and confidence to see it through. Emily woke up early one Saturday morning, the sun streaming through the small window of her apartment above the bike shop. The faint smell of motor oil and gasoline still lingered in the air from yesterday's work. She stretched, feeling the familiar soreness in her muscles from hours of tinkering with the bikes. But it wasn't a bad soreness. It was the kind that came with doing something you loved. She stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. The snow had finally stopped falling, and the town seemed still, as if it were taking a breath after the storm. Emily smiled softly, her eyes scanning the street. It was strange to think how much had changed in just a few short months. When she had first arrived, lost and alone, she never imagined she would feel this way, content, hopeful, even excited about the future. But here she was, ready to face whatever came next. The bike she had been working on for the past few weeks was almost finished, and it was her first full custom build. The thought of it filled her with pride. It wasn't just a project anymore. It was a symbol of her growth, her determination, and the new life she had built for herself. As she made her way downstairs to the shop, she saw Jack already at work, his familiar figure bent over a bike in the garage. He looked up when he heard her footsteps and gave her a nod. "Morning, kid. You ready to finish this one?" he asked, a slight grin tugging at his lips. Emily nodded, walking over to where he was working. "I think so," she said, her voice steady. "It's all coming together." Jack stepped back, inspecting the bike with a critical eye. "It's more than just coming together. It's a damn good bike. You've done some solid work here." Emily beamed at his words. Jack's approval meant more to her than she had ever expected. It wasn't just about the praise. It was about the fact that he had seen her potential from the beginning and had always encouraged her to push forward. "Thanks, Jack," she said quietly. "I couldn't have done it without you." Jack waved her off, clearly uncomfortable with the sentiment. "You did the work. I just pointed you in the right direction." Emily smiled, her heart full of gratitude. She had never been good at accepting compliments, but with Jack, it felt different. He had been the one to show her the path, but it was her determination and skill that had gotten her here. As the morning wore on, they finished assembling the bike. Emily tightened the last bolt, checked the brakes, and cleaned up the work area. It was perfect. The bike gleamed under the fluorescent lights, the chrome shining, the paint job smooth and flawless. It was everything she had hoped for. Jack stepped back, giving the bike a once-over. "This is the kind of work that gets noticed," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You've got a real future ahead of you, Emily." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. It was hard to put into words what Jack's approval meant to her. She had spent so many years doubting herself, wondering if she was good enough. But now, standing here, looking at the bike they had built together, she knew she was. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." Jack just nodded, his usual stoic expression softening for a moment. "You've earned it, kid. Now what's next?" Emily looked at the bike one more time, the excitement bubbling inside her. "Well, now we take it for a ride," she said with a grin. "See how it feels on the road." Jack chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "That's the spirit." Later that day, they took the bike for a test ride. The wind whipped through Emily's hair as she rode down the empty roads, the powerful engine roaring beneath her. It was the first time in her life she felt truly free, not just physically, but emotionally as well. The road stretched out before her, a world of possibilities waiting to be explored. When they returned to the shop, Emily was grinning from ear to ear. Jack was smiling too, though he kept his usual calm demeanor. "You look good out there," he said, his voice filled with approval. "Like you belonged." Emily nodded, her heart racing. "I do belong," she said softly, more to herself than to Jack. "I really do." The next few days were a whirlwind. The bike sold quickly, and with it, Emily's reputation as a skilled mechanic began to grow. Word of her work spread throughout the town, and soon, more customers were coming to the shop, asking for her by name. It was everything she had dreamed of, and more. One evening, as she was finishing up some paperwork in the back of the shop, Jack came over to her, his face serious. "I've been thinking," he said, sitting down across from her. "You're ready for more. I've been talking to some people, and there's a shop down in Denver that's looking for a skilled mechanic. They want someone who knows their stuff. Someone like you." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Denver was a big city, far away from the small town she had come to love. But it was also a huge opportunity, one that could take her career to the next level. That's amazing, she said, her voice filled with surprise. But what about here? What about the shop? Jack smiled, a glint of mischief in his eyes. The shop's not going anywhere, Emily. I'll always be here. But you? You've got to go where you can grow. And I think this is your chance. Emily looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had spent so long running away from her past, but now, she realized, it was time to run toward something. The future. Her future. With a deep breath, Emily stood up. I think you're right, she said, her voice filled with determination. It's time for me to take the next step. Jack smiled, nodding. I knew you'd say that. You've got this, Emily. And with that, Emily knew. It wasn't just about fixing bikes. It was about fixing herself, finding the courage to take that next step and build the life she had always wanted. She was ready to ride down the road to a new future. A future that was all her own. Emily stood at the edge of the bustling Denver skyline, the hum of city life vibrating through the air as she took in the view from the apartment window. It had been weeks since Jack had first mentioned the opportunity, and now, here she was, standing on the precipice of something new. She had made the decision to leave the small town, the bike shop, and the life she had carefully built for herself. She wasn't running from anything anymore. She was moving forward, moving up. As the sun set over the city, Emily felt a mix of excitement and nervousness swirling inside her. The offer in Denver was everything she had ever dreamed of, a chance to work with one of the most prestigious motorcycle shops in the country, to hone her skills in a place where she could grow, learn, and create. It was her chance to prove to herself that she wasn't just someone who fixed bikes in a small town. She was someone who could make it big. She had spent so many years doubting herself, unsure of what her future held. But now, standing here, she knew she was ready for this. She was ready to take on the world. The next morning, after a final breakfast at the little diner she had grown so fond of, Emily packed her bags and said her goodbyes. She hugged Jack tight, grateful for everything he had done for her. I'm gonna miss you, kid, Jack said, his voice rough but full of sincerity. You've got this. I know you do. Emily smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Thanks for believing in me, Jack. You've made all the difference. With one last look at the shop that had been her home for so long, Emily climbed into the taxi and headed to the airport. The ride felt surreal. She was leaving behind everything she had known, everything that had shaped her into who she was. But she wasn't leaving it behind out of fear or doubt. She was leaving it behind to build something bigger, something more. The flight to Denver was long, but Emily didn't mind. She sat by the window, watching the clouds roll by, her mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. What would the new shop be like? Would the people there accept her the way Jack and the townspeople had? Could she really make it in such a competitive industry? She didn't know the answers, but she knew she was ready to find out. When she landed in Denver, the city felt alive. The energy, the people, the constant motion, it was everything she had imagined. She hailed a cab and made her way to the new apartment she had rented. It wasn't much, but it was hers. It was a fresh start, a place where she could begin to build her life again. That evening, as she unpacked her things, Emily took a moment to sit down on the couch and reflect. She had come so far from the scared, lost girl who had first walked into Jack's shop. She had found her purpose, her strength, and now, she was ready to carve out a future for herself. The next morning, she woke up early and headed to the new shop for her first day. As she walked through the doors, she was greeted by the owner, a tall, burly man named Rick. He shook her hand firmly, his grip strong. Welcome to the team, Emily, he said with a smile. We're glad to have you here. Emily smiled back, feeling a nervous flutter in her chest. Thanks for giving me the chance, she said. I won't let you down. Rick nodded. I've heard good things about you. Now let's see what you can do. For the next few hours, Emily worked alongside the team, familiarizing herself with the shop's systems and procedures. It was a lot to take in, but she felt at ease. The work was just like what she had done back in the small town, fixing bikes, tuning engines, making adjustments. As the day went on, Emily began to feel more comfortable, more confident. By the end of the day, Rick pulled her aside. You've got a good head on your shoulders, he said. I can see why Jack spoke highly of you. You've got potential here. Emily's heart swelled with pride. "Thank you," she said quietly, knowing that this was the first step toward proving herself. The next few weeks flew by. Emily settled into her new routine, and as she gained more experience, she began to take on bigger projects. She had always prided herself on her skills, but now she was honing them in ways she never imagined possible. Rick continued to be a great mentor, guiding her through the more complex aspects of the job. He pushed her to be better, to think outside the box, and to take on challenges that would make her grow. Emily loved it. She thrived in this new environment, surrounded by people who appreciated her work and respected her skills. But even as she embraced the new, she never forgot the lessons she had learned from Jack. He had taught her to believe in herself, to trust in her abilities, and to never settle for less than what she deserved. One evening, after a long day of work, Emily sat in the shop, cleaning her tools and reflecting on how far she had come. The sound of the city outside was comforting, a reminder that she was exactly where she needed to be. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out to see a message from Jack. "How's the big city treating you?" it read. Emily smiled as she typed her response. "It's amazing, Jack. I'm learning so much, and I feel like I'm finally where I'm meant to be." She paused before adding, "I miss you, but I know this is the right move." Jack's reply was quick. "I knew you'd do great. Keep pushing yourself, Emily. You've got this." Emily sat back in her chair, her heart full of gratitude. She had found her place, her purpose, and now she was ready to keep moving forward. The road ahead was long, but it was hers to travel. She was no longer the girl who had been abandoned. She was a woman who had built her life, step by step, and there was nothing that could stop her now. Months passed, and Emily's life in Denver began to solidify in ways she hadn't imagined. The shop had become her second home, and with every passing day, she felt more and more like she belonged. She had found her place not just in the city, but in herself. The bike she had built, her first big project since coming to Denver, had been a success. It sold quickly, and the client was more than satisfied with her work. Emily had a reputation now, one that was growing steadily among the people in the shop and beyond. She wasn't just known as the new mechanic anymore. She was Emily, a skilled bike builder with an eye for detail, someone who could be trusted with even the most challenging projects. There were still moments when she thought about the small town she had left behind, the bike shop with Jack, the familiar faces that had watched her grow. But those thoughts didn't weigh her down like they used to. She knew that she had made the right decision. She was building something for herself now. One evening, after a long day of working on a high-end custom bike, Emily stayed late at the shop, cleaning up her workspace. She loved the quiet that came after hours, the hum of the overhead lights and the soft clink of tools being put away. As she wiped down the counters, the door to the shop opened, and Rick walked in. "I was just about to head home," Emily said, looking up. "Did I miss something?" Rick smiled and shook his head. "No, I just wanted to talk to you for a minute." Emily set the cloth down and walked over to him. "What's up?" "I've been thinking," Rick began, his voice thoughtful. "You've been here a while now, and I think you're ready for something more." Emily raised an eyebrow. "More? Like what?" Rick leaned against one of the bikes, crossing his arms. "There's a motorcycle convention coming up in a few weeks. It's a big deal, and I've been invited to showcase some of the bikes we've worked on here. I was wondering if you'd want to take charge of one of the displays." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had heard about the convention. It was the kind of event that could change the trajectory of a career. The chance to show off her work to a room full of industry professionals, people who could open doors she had only dreamed about. "You want me to take charge of a display?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Rick nodded. "You've got the skills, Emily. I think you're ready. It's your time to shine." Emily stood there for a moment, absorbing what Rick had said. This was the kind of opportunity she had always hoped for, but now that it was right in front of her, she couldn't help but feel a wave of nerves wash over her. Could she really do it? Could she represent the shop, her work, in front of so many people? Rick seemed to read her thoughts. "You've got this. I wouldn't ask if I didn't believe in you." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle in her chest. She had always been afraid of stepping up, of taking risks. But this time, something inside her told her she was ready. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "I'll do it." Rick smiled. "I knew you'd say that. I'll get everything set up. You just focus on making it perfect." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Emily worked tirelessly, planning the layout, choosing which bikes to showcase, and making sure everything was perfect. She knew that this was her moment, and she wasn't going to let it slip by. The night before the convention, she stayed late, double-checking every detail. When she finally left the shop, it was well past midnight, and the streets of Denver were quiet. As she walked to her apartment, she felt a mix of excitement and anxiety, but mostly, she felt ready. She had worked so hard for this moment, and now, it was finally here. The morning of the convention arrived, and Emily was up early, making sure everything was set for the big day. She arrived at the venue with Rick and the rest of the team, the buzz of the convention already filling the air. The hall was massive, filled with motorcycle enthusiasts, industry experts, and collectors from all over the country. As the doors opened, Emily felt her heart race. This was real. This was her moment. She walked with purpose to her display, her eyes scanning the crowd as she set everything in place. The bikes were shining, the labels were perfect, and everything looked exactly as she had planned. As people started to wander through the displays, Emily felt a sense of pride swell in her chest. She was being noticed. She could see the way people were admiring her work, stopping to take pictures of the bikes she had carefully curated. As the day wore on, Emily found herself talking to people who were genuinely interested in her work, asking her questions, complimenting her on the bikes. She had never felt so alive. At the end of the day, when the crowd had thinned and the convention hall started to empty out, Rick walked over to her with a proud smile. "You did it, Emily. You absolutely crushed it." Emily couldn't help but smile, her heart soaring with the praise. "I can't believe it," she said, her voice full of disbelief. "This was amazing." Rick clapped her on the back. "This is just the beginning. I told you, you've got a future here." As they packed up for the night, Emily realized something important. She had stepped out of her comfort zone, taken a risk, and it had paid off. She wasn't the same person who had walked into that small bike shop months ago. She was Emily, a skilled mechanic, a creator, and someone who was now recognized for her talent. The future had never seemed brighter, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Months had passed since the convention, and life in Denver had continued to unfold in ways that Emily had never expected. The shop, which had once seemed like a new and intimidating chapter, had become her home. The people in it, her colleagues and the customers alike, now felt like family. The success of the convention had opened many doors for her. Requests for custom builds came in frequently, and Emily was quickly gaining a reputation as one of the most skilled mechanics in the shop. With each new project, her confidence grew. She felt more comfortable in her own skin than she ever had before. One afternoon, after a particularly challenging day of work, Emily found herself reflecting on how far she had come. She had come a long way from the girl who had wandered into Jack's shop, unsure of her place in the world. Now, she was carving out a future for herself, a future that felt right. As Emily closed up the shop for the day, Rick walked over to her. "Hey kid," he said with a grin. "You're killing it. We've got more projects lined up than we know what to do with." Emily smiled, wiping the sweat from her brow. "I'm just doing what I love," she said, trying to keep her excitement in check. "You've got a lot more of that coming your way," Rick said with a wink. "And I think you're ready for the next step." Emily paused, confused. "The next step?" "Yeah," Rick continued. "I've been talking to some people about expanding the shop. We're thinking about opening another location, maybe in a bigger city. And I'd like you to run it." Emily blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Wait, you want me to run a shop?" Rick nodded. "You've got the experience, the skills, and the vision. I believe you can handle it." Emily's mind raced. Running a shop? It was a huge responsibility, and a part of her wanted to shy away from it, unsure if she was ready. But then she thought back to all the moments when Jack had pushed her to believe in herself, when she had thought she wasn't capable of doing something but had proven herself wrong. She had always risen to the challenge. And this, too, could be another step in her journey. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the swirling emotions inside her. Rick smiled, a proud glint in his eyes. "I knew you'd say that." The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, plans, and discussions about the new shop. Emily had to decide on a location, hire staff, and figure out all the logistics that came with managing a new business. It was a lot to handle, but for the first time, she didn't feel overwhelmed. She was excited. She felt capable. She was ready. On the day the new shop officially opened, Emily stood in front of the building, her heart swelling with pride. This was her dream coming true. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and now it was all happening. As she stepped inside, the place was buzzing with activity. Staff were setting up, customers were arriving, and the air was filled with the sound of engines revving and tools clinking. It was everything she had imagined. "Ready for this?" Rick asked, walking up beside her. Emily smiled, feeling a rush of excitement. Absolutely. The first few days were challenging, as she worked to get the new shop running smoothly. There were so many details to handle, so many decisions to make. But Emily was in her element. She loved the work, and she loved the team she was building. Slowly but surely, the shop began to thrive. Word spread about the new location, and soon, business was booming. Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment as she watched the shop grow. She wasn't just running a business. She was building something that mattered. She was making a difference. One evening, as the shop started to wind down, Emily sat down in the back office, staring out at the workshop floor. She had come so far from the frightened girl who had arrived in Denver, unsure of herself and her future. Now, she was a business owner, a leader, and someone who had built a life she could be proud of. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jack. "How's the new shop going?" it read. Emily smiled as she typed her response. "It's going great, Jack. I'm finally where I'm meant to be." Jack's reply was quick. "I'm proud of you, Emily. You've always had it in you." Emily sat back in her chair, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had come so far, and yet, she knew that this was only the beginning. The future was wide open, and for the first time in her life, she felt ready to take it on. She wasn't just a girl who had been abandoned anymore. She was a woman who had found her place, her purpose, and her strength. And there was nothing that could stop her now. As the days went by, Emily continued to pour her heart into the shop. She made it a place where people could come not just for repairs, but for inspiration, a place where passion for motorcycles and the craft of building them was celebrated. She had built something from nothing, and it was thriving. Emily knew that there would be challenges ahead, but she was no longer afraid of them. She had built a life from the ground up, and she knew she could handle anything that came her way. She had finally found her place in the world, and it felt like home. As the months continued to pass, Emily's life settled into a comfortable routine, but the world around her was constantly changing. The second shop she had opened was flourishing, and the reputation she had built over the years continued to grow. People came from all over to get their bikes worked on by the skilled mechanic who had built her own future from the ground up. Every day, Emily was reminded of how far she had come, how a single decision to leave behind the life she had once known had changed everything. But despite her success, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The shop, the bikes, the work, it was all fulfilling in its own way, but she began to wonder if she was truly living the life she had always dreamed of, or if she had simply settled into the life that was available to her. One rainy afternoon, as she was locking up the shop for the evening, Emily stood in the doorway and stared out at the wet streets. The city felt different tonight, quieter, more reflective. As she walked to her car, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from Rick. "You still thinking about the race?" Emily paused, her breath catching in her throat. The race. It was something she had thought about for years, a dream she had tucked away deep inside her. Every year, there was a big motorcycle race held in a neighboring city, a race that attracted the best riders from all over the country. It was a challenge, a test of skill and endurance, and the idea of competing had always appealed to Emily. But it had always seemed like a distant dream, something out of reach. "I don't know," Emily typed back, her fingers hovering over the keys. "I've got so much going on at the shop. It feels like a lot to take on." "I know you've got a lot on your plate," Rick replied. "But you've got the talent, Emily, and the determination. You've already proven to yourself that you can do anything. You've built something amazing, and now it's time to show the world what you're really capable of." Emily stared at the message for a long time, the words sinking in. She had always prided herself on her ability to create and build, but she had never taken the time to prove to herself that she could do something more, something that was just for her, something that challenged her in ways she hadn't been challenged before. The idea of the race suddenly felt like something she couldn't ignore. It wasn't just about winning. It was about proving to herself that she was more than just the girl who had once been abandoned. It was about embracing the risks, pushing her limits, and showing the world that she wasn't afraid to chase her dreams. After a long moment, Emily typed her response. "I'm in." The days leading up to the race were a whirlwind. Emily poured herself into preparing for the event, getting her bike in top condition, fine-tuning every detail to make sure everything was perfect. The competition would be fierce, but Emily felt a sense of focus and determination she hadn't experienced in a long time. This wasn't just another bike project. It was a test of everything she had learned, a challenge that would push her to the limits of her abilities. As the race day approached, Emily began to feel a mix of excitement and anxiety. She knew the risks. The course was treacherous, the competition fierce, and the stakes high. But she also knew that this was what she had worked for, what she had always wanted. The night before the race, Emily sat in her apartment, going over her strategy one last time. Her hands shook slightly as she packed her gear, but the nerves didn't feel like fear. They felt like anticipation, the kind of anticipation that comes right before a big moment. The next morning, Emily stood at the starting line, her bike roaring beneath her. The crowd was huge, their cheers and excitement filling the air. She could feel the energy around her, the thrill of the race, the challenge that lay ahead. She looked around at the other competitors, sizing them up. They all looked like experienced riders, like people who had been doing this their whole lives. But Emily knew she belonged here, too. She wasn't just another mechanic anymore. She was a rider, someone who had earned the right to be here. The sound of the starting horn echoed through the air, and the race began. The course was challenging, filled with sharp turns, steep hills, and sudden drops. Emily leaned into every curve, feeling the rush of adrenaline as she navigated the obstacles. Every muscle in her body was focused on the bike, on the road, on the race. She was in the zone, her mind clear, her body moving with precision. The race was intense, and Emily pushed herself harder with every lap. Her bike roared through the course, the sound of the engine almost drowned out by the rush of wind in her ears. She could feel her heart pounding, her focus sharpening. She wasn't just racing against the clock or the other riders. She was racing against herself, proving to herself that she could do something she had always dreamed of. As she rounded the final corner and crossed the finish line, Emily's heart soared. She had done it. She wasn't sure where she had placed, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that she had faced the challenge, pushed herself beyond her limits, and had come out stronger on the other side. When the results were announced, Emily learned that she had finished in the top 5, a result that exceeded even her own expectations. The feeling of accomplishment was overwhelming. She had done it. She had proven to herself that she could be more than just a mechanic. She could be a competitor, a force to be reckoned with. That night, as Emily stood at the edge of the track, watching the other riders celebrate, she felt a deep sense of pride. She had taken a risk, and it had paid off. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she had truly found her place, not just in the shop, not just in the city, but in the world. The future was wide open, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The weeks following the race were a blur of success and growth for Emily. The recognition she had gained from the race was just the beginning. She had proved herself, not only to others but to herself. She was no longer the girl who had wandered into a small town, lost and uncertain. She was someone who had built a life and found her place in the world. Back at the shop, Emily found herself even more energized, eager to take on new challenges and dive deeper into the craft that had given her so much. She continued to work with Rick and the team, taking on bigger and more complex projects. The business was booming, and Emily was at the heart of it all, overseeing projects, managing the team, and making sure every bike that came through the doors was given the care and attention it deserved. But even as she thrived at the shop, Emily began to feel a deeper calling. The race had opened her eyes to a new world, a world where she could push her limits, chase new goals, and test herself in ways she hadn't before. She had always loved the mechanics of building and fixing bikes, but now, she wanted more. She wanted to challenge herself in ways that went beyond the shop. One evening, after a long day at work, Emily sat in her apartment, staring at the city skyline. The lights twinkled in the distance, and for a moment, she felt a sense of stillness. The feeling that had been bubbling inside her for weeks finally settled, and she knew what she had to do. She had to take her next step. Emily had always been afraid of leaving her comfort zone, but she had learned something valuable over the past few months. She was capable of more than she had ever realized. She had started with nothing and built a life that was hers. Now, she was ready to take that life to the next level. The next day, Emily called Rick and told him her decision. "I've been thinking a lot about my next move," she said, "and I think it's time for me to branch out. I want to compete more, really push myself in the racing world." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Rick spoke. "You've got the talent, Emily. You've always had it. But this is a big decision. Are you sure you're ready for the commitment it takes?" Emily took a deep breath. "I'm ready. I've been working toward this without even realizing it. And now I'm ready to make it happen." Rick's voice softened. "Well, you know I'll support you. You've earned everything you've got, and I know you'll keep going. Just don't forget where you started." Emily smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. "I won't forget. Thanks, Rick." With Rick's support, Emily set her sights on the racing world. She started training more seriously, dedicating herself to improving her skills. She worked with top racers, learned new techniques, and spent countless hours on the track. The road to becoming a professional racer was long and demanding, but Emily was no stranger to hard work. She threw herself into it with the same determination that had gotten her this far. Months passed, and Emily's skills improved dramatically. She began competing in local races again, each time coming closer to victory. She learned to push herself harder, faster, and smarter. The thrill of the race was unlike anything she had experienced before. It was a test of everything: her focus, her strength, and her willpower. And every time she crossed the finish line, no matter the result, she felt herself growing. One day, after a particularly tough race, Emily sat in the pit, catching her breath. Her heart was still racing, and her body was sore, but there was a feeling of satisfaction deep inside her. She had given it her all, and that was enough. Rick came over to check on her, a proud smile on his face. "You did great out there," he said. "You've come a long way since that first race." Emily wiped the sweat from her brow and smiled back at him. "I'm not done yet," she said, determination in her voice. "This is just the beginning." And it was. Emily continued to push forward, always striving for more, always aiming higher. She competed in more races, building her name in the racing community. The crowd began to recognize her, the girl who had started with nothing but a dream and a bike, now one of the top racers in the country. Emily knew there would always be challenges ahead, but she had learned something important. She was never alone in her journey. The people she had met along the way, from Jack and Rick to the racers and fans, had become her support system, her team. And as long as she had them by her side, there was nothing she couldn't face. Looking back at everything she had accomplished, Emily realized how far she had come. She had started with nothing, but now, she had everything she had ever wanted: her own shop, her racing career, and most importantly, her belief in herself. The future was wide open, and for the first time, Emily was no longer afraid. She was ready for whatever came next. And no matter where the road took her, she knew one thing for sure: she would keep riding, keep pushing, keep racing toward her dreams.